Hi, Chris. Nice to see you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to meet you finally after years of
I know.
reading and listening and watching.
Well, for me, it's more like stalking, peeking into Facebook, and liking random things.
Right.
But thank you very much for agreeing to come on, and I'm very excited about this chat. Although I had some ideas about what to talk about, obviously a lot of your expertise and your experience in the field, but I'm also more than happy to have an organic conversation to see where this veer.
Well, I loved the questions you gave me were amazing. I've never had somebody give me so many to think about, and so I feel
Sorry.
very primed for a conversation. No, it was great, and excuse me, I honestly am thinking that I might do like a Substack post or something just based on producing so much content around your questions. If
Oh,
we don't get to them all, and it was, I don't think we possibly could get to them all in this
no.
conversation.
Go for it. I mean, sorry for overwhelming you. That's my
No,
overexcitability. But as I said in the email though, we really don't have to get through all of them. Those are just in case I get brain fog. I've got something to look at. But otherwise, yeah, we will see how this unfolds.
great.
Hmm. Well, why don't you tell although I imagine some of our audience would probably already know you, some may not. Can you tell us a little about, maybe that's really difficult because you do so many things. Um, but tell us who you are, what you're passionate about, and what's your typical workflow? What do you do?
Sure. Well, so yeah, I'm Chris Wells, and I'm a writer, I would say first and
Hmm.
foremost. That's my passion, I think, is for writing and just thinking. And I have a real passion for honoring the inner experience in gifted, complex, intense people, including myself. And so that's the thing I love the most. But I'm also a podcaster and I'm a researcher. And those are two more things that I really love and care about. I have a podcast called Positive Disintegration. That was the first one. And now I have two other podcasts that I'm working on, Cosmic Cheer Squad with my friend B. Mayhew and PDA Resistance and Resilience with Marnie Camersell, which just
Wait,
came
wait,
out like two
wait, wait.
days ago.
I was not
And well, and I
aware of
should say
that.
that in Positive Disintegration is with Emma Nicholson. But yeah, so the PDA podcast just launched this week,
Because
and
I know
um,
B, and I didn't know that she does podcasting. It's again another
yes,
Facebook mutual stalking, liking relationship, and me
right,
liking her baked goods on a daily basis. But
yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so right, and so all three are so different, right? And the one with B, Cosmic Cheer Squad, is just us really having real conversations, but from, well, we're hoping to encourage people to be a little more anti-authoritarian here in the
Mm,
US, to think a little more critically and to push back a little harder against what we're seeing here in multiple
okay,
ways.
okay. Well, we may touch on that again because I'm sure all your works are tied in together. Yeah. I came across your work when I was looking into, well, I actually don't know how I got into it, but once I start looking into your work, obviously what really jumps out are overexcitability, Dabrowski's theory. We don't have to spend the entire chat on that, but when people read your bio, they read how this journey of you discovering Dabrowski's theory. And to me, I do think it's not an easy theory to read about. I think it's incredibly complex. I'm not surprised that you have an entire podcast surrounding it. If you were to mm, give us a brief idea in case people haven't heard of it, and then tell us what about this particular framework that resonates with you in ways that other psychological models don't?
Sure. So Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration, it says that inner conflict, even deep suffering, that these are signs of growth, not illness. And it's really a revolutionary reframe of the medical model, in
Yeah.
my opinion. I mean,
Yes.
that to me is what was so beautiful about it when I first discovered it, because I found it in middle age after spending years not only being pathologized by clinicians, but pathologizing myself. I mean, that's how it
Mm,
all started. It started because I was a young person who just assumed that my intensity and sensitivities were something wrong with me. And so I looked for answers in the DSM and in psychiatry. And then eventually, once I was an adult, went to psychiatrists looking for answers and therapists. And people were happy to pathologize me, although I did have the occasional clinician who resisted that. But then years later, to discover this theory while I was looking for answers about my son, in the gifted education literature, just totally blew my mind. And I thought, wow, here is another way of looking at things. But honestly, it took years to really overcome my own internalized ableism and really accept myself for who I am. And I think that that is what's so powerful about our podcast, Positive Disintegration, is that, we have these conversations not only with me and Emma, but we bring other people on who share about their own personal journeys of coming to, these ideas and seeing themselves. I mean, I think that's what resonated with me at first when I discovered the theory was it was like finally being seen for who I am, realizing that these experiences of like inner turmoil weren't actually, it didn't mean that I was broken.
mm,
It meant that I was becoming and growing and developing, and having that developmental lens was huge.
yes. That's succinct and clear. And I think it resonates with many who came across this idea, although many also shy away from the label gifted. Mm. To those who do feel funny about the word, what do you say to them usually? If there's such a yeah.
Well, I mean, to people who really struggle with the word gifted, I'd say, well, I get it. It's a very loaded term, obviously. Um, you know, I guess I guess that the way that I talk about it is like also saying that part of this journey for me was realizing that giftedness has been so misunderstood, that it's so much more than just achievement. I think that's
Mm,
part of the problem is if you only understand it through this lens of gifted education and thinking about it as achievement, what you do in school or in the classroom, then yeah, I can see how it's problematic and also how it's been, misused, how it has been
has it been
it
misused?
has, well, I think so. I mean, I think that at least here in the United States, in the field of gifted education, there's a long history of exclusion of people not trying hard enough until maybe recent years to make sure that there was equity and
Mm,
that it was not only for people who have privilege. And so, yeah, I mean, it has a really fraught history.
mm,
I mean, we could go into all of that, but basically realizing that to have like a higher intellectual capacity, it's real. Like, and even just beyond the intellectual, there's more than one way to be gifted. You can be emotionally gifted, you can be spiritually gifted, you can be, physically or athletically gifted. There's just you can be a great leader. Like there's so many different ways for this to manifest, but I've never met somebody who I thought was truly gifted who wasn't a complex person who,
mm,
grappled with existential questions and issues who, there's so much more to it than what
mm.
you can do.
Yeah.
It's who you are. It's not just what you can do. And so, yeah, there's so much more to it
How do you
than we
see its
realize.
linked? Sorry, these are not really questions I prepared, but how do you see its link with IQ? Because I always try and tell people that to me there is a link, but it really doesn't capture it all. And
Right.
with organizations like Mensa or some even higher intelligence, like 999, or I forgot what they're called. How do you see the link? And if you're in the gifted education space, I'm sure you get questions like that quite often.
Yeah, the link is definitely there with high IQ. It's true. And I mean, I've spent enough time around people in these societies, adults, it's interesting because, I've had a good amount of experience with gifted children. I worked at UNASA, a camp for gifted kids, I think 5 times. And so, to be around gifted children is great. They are so intense and amazing. And, you know that the kids are there. They've all what would I say? Like, I mean, they've had their parents have had to like give the evidence of their giftedness for them to go to camp, and then you get to camp and you see even within the kids there are levels of giftedness, and that's real too, even within levels of IQ, right? Like, there's a difference between going to a Mensa meeting and going to the 999 Society. I've seen people from multiple, populations of gifted, I guess, is what I would say. And so IQ does matter. If you have a high IQ, yeah, you are neurodivergent. That's a different way of processing reality than somebody who doesn't have a high IQ. Doesn't make you
Mm.
better than them. It has
Mhm.
its own set of challenges. And not everybody with a high IQ has other aspects of giftedness, like the overexcitabilities, for instance. I mean, they're almost certainly going to
So
have
not
high
everyone
intellectual.
with high IQ have over accessibilities, you say.
Right. And
Mm.
and they may, I mean, I think that the connection with intellectual overexcitability is probably almost always there if you have a
Yeah,
high IQ, but
yeah,
not emotional, not the others. I mean, I can give example after example of people who have extremely high IQs who
yeah,
don't seem to have other kinds of overexcitability. And
same.
even if they do have overexcitability, they may not have dynamisms that
Mm.
have evolved from those overexcitabilities. And that is the meat of the theory of positive disintegration. And if you don't have the dynamisms, if you're not in multi-level development, which of course is like another whole conversation, the
You
difference
may have to
between
expand on
unilevel and
dynamism for
multi-level,
me and our
right?
audience.
Right. And so, yeah, so Dabrowski, even in his earliest work, was grappling with these two main developmental processes that he identified, one called unilevel and one called multi-level. And most people, he thought, were in a unilevel process. They weren't operating from their own self-created,
Mm.
emotionally discovered hierarchy of values. They had kind of adopted the values of their parents and people around them in their social environment. And
Mm.
so that's pretty typical, I would say. But people who do discover their own values and operate from them, he saw may have these multi-level dynamisms, and there are many of them. I think there's 29 or 30 dynamisms total, but um, the unilevel ones are ambivalences, ambitendencies, and the second factor, which the second factor is just really the influence of the social environment. And then there's many multi-level ones: guilt, shame, dissatisfaction with oneself, inferiority toward oneself, disquietude with oneself. Like, there there's so many: subject object in oneself, inner psychic transformation. It goes
Mm.
on and on the list. Empathy is a dynamism in this theory that operates across levels. And
Mm.
so like you said earlier, it's a very complex theory. It's really deep. And um, just thinking about my own journey with it, like I said, at first I was encountering it in the gifted education literature, but then to go from that to actually reading Dabrowski's words and seeing that he was capturing things about my experience that I had always seen as evidence of mental illness was totally mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
Like the experience of having an imaginal world. I lived in my imagination for most of my life until I was in middle age. And most people that I was honest with that about in therapy, patho or psychiatrists pathologized it.
Yeah.
But for Dabrowski, it was evidence that I was always grasping for a higher reality than the one that I
Yeah.
was living in
Mm,
concrete reality. And
mm.
so just totally mind blowing to have that reframe.
I hear that. I hear that. Actually, what you're saying now is pretty mind-blowing, perhaps for many of us. So dynamism, as far as I understand it, they are these internal drive process that push for growth towards authenticity. Correct me, you're definitely much more of an expert in his theory. And
No, that
when I
was
say
beautiful.
and something is so intriguing because at first I think I just thought IQ, giftedness. I never thought they were equivalent, but I was never able to describe why is it that in Mensa, for instance, I do see a lot of people who are very bright, and yet they don't seem to have the same level of existential struggles. And I used to see it in very simplistic term where some people seem to be able to fit in very well with the conventional models of being. You know, they do very well in schools, in conventional jobs, whereas you see others who just slip through the cracks of our conventional system and from the surface. And it creates a lot of misunderstanding because they probably get comments, hurtful ones, like, oh, if you're so smart, why are you like not earning lots of money? And but then I see so much of giftedness in these people too, where you know they have high intellectual drive, obviously, high moral standards, incredible frustration about injustice in the world, and a high degree of misfitness. Misfit, being a misfit in society is what I see very often. So you saying that not everyone with high IQ has dynamism explains it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating to me because, so again, like I came to this theory and gifted ed from the perspective of having seen myself as a mental patient for many years first.
Mm,
And then I realized like another part of my journey has been accepting myself as non-binary, accepting myself as not only ADHD, which was a diagnosis I'd been given earlier, in life when I was like 24, but understanding ADHD beyond a diagnosis and as like a neurotype, and then autism, PDA, pathological demand avoidance, all of these aspects of myself to help me understand myself better. And so what I've seen in the gifted field is such a resistance to neurodivergence outside of gifted. And I mean, even overexcitability is just the denial of how they also explain autism, ADHD, synesthesia, dyslexia. It's a part of many other neurotypes. But in the gifted field, there's so much ableism. There's such a drive to see it as, um, yeah, as like separate and better than these other things.
mm,
And so this is something that has been really hard for me to
mm.
deal with, honestly, because in my work with Dabrowski's early Polish work, especially, it was really clear to me, okay, well, this man was a psychiatrist and a psychologist. He worked with institutionalized children in the 1930s and was developing his theory based on his work with them. And then you have this field now in the 21st century that still resists so strongly the idea that overexcitability could be anything but a characteristic of giftedness. And it's like, no, this couldn't be more obvious. And yet, the more I say this and am clear about it in my work, the less interest I see from people in the field in wanting to have me come and give talks. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yes, I see that connection very clearly. They don't want it to be also underlying these other kinds of neurodivergence.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to see a whole field be so resistant to truth.
Mm.
And that's why I think they're in such an existential crisis right now, at least here in America.
That is such an insider perspective that unless I talk to you would not know. What drives that? This denial, this refusal of truth. It's hard to
I
imagine.
think I think it's complicated. I think there's many reasons behind it, but I think it's it's a big part of why I've been moving away from gifted ed and the gifted community over the past year.
Are you?
Yeah, I really am. I have to put my energy elsewhere at this point. And I think the biggest problem is individual personalities who have so much personally invested in being right and being the authority and saying this is the way it is,
Hmm.
that it means that there's not enough space for other voices and other especially conflicting viewpoints to coexist. It's complicated. I see a lot of writing for myself in future years just about what I have like documented and experienced while I've been working in this field. Unfortunately, the prejudice, the discrimination, it's real.
Hmm.
I'm grateful for podcasting, which is such a great way to get your voice out there and
Hmm.
your work out there without gatekeepers trying to
Yes.
hold you back.
Yes. That's a great thing about our generation, where there are lots of dark side to it because yeah, I think the lack of gatekeeping probably has more positive than negative, but then there also isn't any quality control anymore.
True. True. It's not exactly peer reviewed. That's right. And so it is
Mm,
kind of the opposite issue. But yeah, I have been extremely disillusioned in the gifted community.
I
And
hear you. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. I'm sorry about your experience. And you really have made the best out of your experience and turned it into something really great
I'm
with your
trying. I'm
dynamism.
trying.
Yes. Ah, so many paths we can. Well, you talked about years of being pathologized for your excitabilities. I think that's a shared experience for many, especially by therapists, educators, mental health professional, sometimes even in the neurodivergent space, because I don't think majority of the population associates being neurodivergent with having higher than average IQ or anything like that at all. So what do you think some are some common blind spots professionals might have? And more importantly, since you came out the other side, how can anyone advocate for themselves?
Oh, well, yeah, the
Take it
blind
away.
spots. I think just missing that
Mm,
existential intensity that you have if you have emotional overexcitability especially and the intellectual and imaginational, I mean it tends to produce a, a kind of intensity that clinicians who don't have it especially don't understand, and especially since they haven't been given this language of positive disintegration, and Dabrowski had this like really visionary ability to see beyond the mainstream understanding of these issues. And so I think that, like, yeah, just one blind spot is not having an awareness that this population, well, and then that goes in with the giftedness issue too. And like I'm trying to move beyond just thinking of giftedness. And of course, like we've already said, it's more than high IQ, um, but a lot of people are gifted who don't even realize they are because of the fact that giftedness is so much more than what it has been understood as IQ or what you do in school. So
mm,
that's one blind spot. It's just a total lack of understanding
mm,
about it as more than
mm,
that. But also not understanding the moral sensitivity that can come with having these overexcitabilities too. That sense of injustice. I think that so often, if you go in and talk to a clinician about these issues, they may not see you clearly. Um, and then, like the other aspect of that, like how to advocate for yourself. I gave a lot of thought to that, and it's tough. I mean, part of it can be understanding the language better, maybe, and bringing that to a clinician who's open to learning. I've
mm,
had people write to us, like to positive disintegration, and say, I brought this material to my therapist and they were open to it and we're having conversations about that now. And I always love to hear that people are open and willing. But it doesn't always happen. And I think that what I say to people is if you are going to a clinician who is dismissive of your experience, who is unwilling to listen and hear what you have to say, you shouldn't be going to them. That is not the clinician for you. Do not continue in a therapeutic relationship with someone who may be harming you. Because,
Mm.
I mean, that's another part of my story is going to so many clinicians and giving them maybe more benefit of the doubt or more
Mm.
opportunities to do right than I should have when I should have just walked away.
It's really hard though when all your life you've been gaslit. You already
Yes.
believe you're in the wrong, and then there's this person in a white coat, bad a tear
That's
today, Imi. Um, yeah, with all the authority telling you you are this and that. Like I, for one, know that although I always want to disagree with my doctor, it's very hard when you're like one against the whole imagined community. Um,
it is hard. It really is. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't mean to make it sound easy.
and that was a part of my question where for people in, who are really stuck in the narrative that I'm the broken one, they probably have been blamed by their family and peers all their lives. You're too much, you're this, you're that, you are the dramatic one. Why are you making a big deal of this when no one else is? Okay, let's give them a practical first thing they could do, apart from go and read your words and listen to your podcast. What might be some of the things they can actually start doing to reframe their experience or even to start? Well, I sometimes tell people this to start doubting that narrative.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways into this is to start developing your own awareness of how your what your self-talk is like. How are you talking to yourself? You know, in your mind, in your words, if you journal, how kind are you being to yourself? Because I can just say from my experience, once I kind of opened the door to looking at that, I realized that I was so my harshest critic and that the language I used against myself was a kind of violence. And I've had to really work hard to change the way I treat myself and to be kinder and gentler with
mm,
myself. And that has been one of the most transformative things that I've done. And it's been a huge part of my own self acceptance. And it really matters. Like we have to accept ourselves as who we are before we can change ourselves. This is actually something that's not really present in Dabrowski's work, is, you know, that's kind of we have to be able to do that before we can grow, I think.
mm.
And but yeah, it's not easy. It's really challenging. And it takes time to even become fully aware of it.
Yeah. I think I work quite a lot with people who are at that crossroad where am I in the wrong or maybe not? That kind of questioning. Do you, if this might get a bit personal, but did you just find that strength within yourself? Or were you fortunate enough to have a supportive voice to almost, I don't know about your childhood story, and we don't have to go into any of that, but I used the word reparenting, like to kind of reparent, reorient the whole thing, like someone who just unconditionally sees you, especially they might. I guess that's why people hire a gifted coach or therapist for someone who specializes in this and really see it and to champion that side of it and to help them reframe how they've seen themselves. Did you have such a person or such a force, or did you just go through your own reading and find it within yourself?
I've been really lucky in my lifetime to have supportive relationships in multiple ways, and I think across my life for the most part. Even though, you know, my it was complicated with my parents. My parents were really young. They were both
Mm.
teenagers when I was born.
All
My
right.
father was only 16 when I was born,
It's
and
young.
so they were just kids when they had me. And yet, I they were always there and supportive for me to the best of their abilities, I think. But there were always other adults when I was young who were willing to be there for me as
Mm.
supportive people. This is actually something that I study through the lens of autoethnography. And this summer, I will be presenting at a conference and kind of unveiling my method of autoethnography for the first time. And so this is really kind of at the forefront of my mind. But I'm calling my method relational developmental autoethnography because it not only brings in Dabrowski's theory of positive disintegration, but relational cultural theory as well, because I
Mm.
really do believe in relational resilience. I don't think I would be here right now if it hadn't been for these supportive people in my life who always seemed to see me and appreciate me for who I was, even when I didn't. You know,
Yeah.
these were people who, even when I was in the mental hospital over and over again and on medication and an addict when I was in my 20s, who saw through all of that and were like, no, you have a beautiful soul and someday you will see who you really are. And of course at the time I was just like, ah, oh, like, why can't you see that I'm mentally ill? But, you know, I was lucky to always have people who could see me even when I couldn't see myself.
I feel a bit teary hearing that. I guess I'm thinking about people in my own life who did that for me. Not a lot, but two or three would be enough. Yeah. That ability to penetrate through the facade, the chaos into your soul and essence, and to hold the faith that there's something in there despite what's going on, that's precious. And what's brilliant about this, I always think, is you absorb these nutrients and you can use them for life. Many of these people that I'm thinking about in my personal life are no longer in my life, but I hold the faith that I could recycle and reinforce those nutrients for the rest of my life. And that's how powerful it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm even thinking now, I mean, my partner, we've been together for 25 years, and I
Yeah.
always think about our first dates with each other 25 years ago and how he too was like, it was like he could just see through all of that too, because I remember, you know, at the time when we were first getting to know each other, I had only been clean from smoking crack for like 6 months, and
Hmm.
I had this long psychiatric history at that point, even though I was only like 27. And I remember telling him, well, yeah, I mean, I'm excited that we're together too, but you should be warned that, you know, I have this terrible past. And he just was like, oh, okay. Like, you're like, he just was able to see past all of that. And now when I think back on that, I'm like, wow, I don't think I even realized what a precious gift it is to find somebody who can do that.
Absolutely. That whole warning thing you did was interesting because we see this in people when you have such low self-esteem and then you go into your relationship, you do so much warning. Like, I'm telling you, I'm messed up. I'm telling him, warning in the first day, you're not going to be happy in this relationship. And sometimes we don't do it, but we don't do it verbally. We do it with our behaviors or push them away.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to prove how bad we are to test that you're still going to be here. Yeah, but that's really precious. 25 years. Did you say 25?
Yeah,
Oh, what an
I
achievement.
know. I know. It's pretty mind-blowing to me.
I think in our fast-moving world with dating apps and everything, being able to put up with anyone, quote unquote, for, well, I don't know, 5 years is a huge achievement, let alone 25. Yeah, it's
It's true.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I mean, with the the theory positive I actually quite like the title of it. Positive disintegration itself is the contrast in there. Um, but I guess someone would ask, how do we tell? How can we tell then when I'm actually falling apart and I need some serious help in a destructive way versus, okay, this is just my positive disintegration. I am integrating. I mean, is it a meaningful differentiation or can we tell? How can we tell?
That's a good one because it always makes me think of Dabrowski's book from 1964, Positive Disintegration, because in the introduction by this man, Jason Aronson, he talks about the fact that even Dabrowski didn't have clarity on, I guess, is it a positive disintegration? Well, we'll find out on the other side of it. Like, well,
Okay.
because like, well, what's happening? I mean, what dynamisms are present? Is what values are surfacing? I think
Mm,
that's an important question. Is this a values
what
conflict? And
values?
I don't think
Okay.
it's always obvious to people that they're in a values conflict. I mean, I think about that a lot from my times when I was in my 20s. And it's like, what were the values conflicts that I was going through? Well, it was
Mm,
like, first of all, was I going to commit to being alive? Because I was chronically suicidal for years. And so, part of that for me was learning to value life and being alive more than thinking that suicide was an option and that I could kill myself if things didn't get better. Like committing to life
yeah.
and developing myself was a part of that values conflict. And
Mm,
another one was, of course, around addiction.
mm,
As long as it was a battle, like to stay clean and to choose that over getting high, I was kind of trapped in that struggle. And so I don't think it's always clear. And yet, if we can get clarity on the fact that these are values conflicts and that's a way out of resolving them, it helps develop this new path out of it. And so um and yet, like I just described, I think when somebody is chronically suicidal or chronically using substances to escape, to numb, whatever, part of that is just, finding that part of ourselves that has like a higher perspective as a way out of it. And then for me, it was so connected to my
mm,
imagination. Like
mm,
I was imagining myself resolving my addiction and moving out of it in my mind long before I moved out of it in everyday reality. I
mm.
was imagining myself as a new person, making better choices, and then I was able to enact them in my actual life. And yet that's not something I could articulate at the time. It's only something that I saw in the rearview mirror later, like from a retrospective capacity. And so yeah, I think that it's complicated and people can look really mentally ill and still be grappling with dynamisms and values conflicts that aren't clear to the people treating them.
Mm. I think more examples of value conflicts might be helpful. I'm also just thinking about maybe it sounds like a really rudimental question. Why do we, myself included, continue years and years engage in behaviors that are against our conscious core values? Why why do we get stuck in addictive behaviors even when every single brain cells, every single muscle of us says that's not what I believe in, that's not where we want to go, but we still do it? To your
That's a
understanding,
great question.
I know it's a
Well,
big
and
one.
it's a big one and it's so individual and I think there's so
Yeah,
many factors involved,
yeah.
I mean, it totally depends on a person's capacity to self-reflect for one thing and to see what's going on in their own lives, to be aware of other options than what they're doing, to have some clarity on it being a pattern, on it being something that they can even escape from
Mhm.
or find a way out of. I don't think that people realize how much agency they have, how much um, I don't think I don't think I realized when I was younger how much I was the cause of my own suffering in so many ways.
Mm,
My thinking, my choices, it didn't always seem within my control to the extent that it really was. And I was so worried at times about, my parents and was I abandoning them if I did this and other people in my life. And so, like, our relationships have such an impact on our behaviors. And so it's complicated. I don't think that there are easy answers to this.
The phrase value conflict is interesting. For instance, in what you've just mentioned, maybe loyalty and family are some of our very important core values, at the same time, growth. And it can look on the surface in some scenario for them to be in conflict. For addiction,
Yes,
even, your drive for comfort versus your drive for growth, one is not less than the other. So maybe the
that's right.
answer lies in finding a functional way to integrate them. Hmm.
Right. And it's also like one thing that has been super interesting for me as I'm working on this paper to present next month is just thinking about the fact that things aren't as black and white as they seem, even in Dabrowski's work. Like I can see so many times when I've had really, he considered, like I said, ambivalences and ambitendencies as unilevel dynamisms, but they also have multi-level expressions. I mean, there were times of ambivalence where there was like a clear higher versus lower, the values were there, but it was still ambivalence, even though it was a higher level ambivalence than the unilevel kind, where, when I was younger, it was more black and white of like, am I going to stay clean or am I going to get high? Well, later, when I had developed myself more as a person, it was a ambivalence sometimes around the conflicts, even in gifted ed. Like, I want to help people, but how can I help them within this framework? I think that over time, as we grow and develop, the dynamisms look differently. And one of the biggest problems with the theory of positive disintegration is just the lack of research to give
Yeah.
light on these dynamisms, how they look. I mean, how they look in people who aren't moral exemplars. The only case studies we have of these dynamisms in modern times come from Michael Piechowski,
Mm.
and they are his exemplars of the highest levels of development. Well, where are the examples of dynamisms in people who appear mentally ill? Well, that's what I'm trying to help out with by sharing my own personal data from when I was younger and to
Mm.
say, well, this is what it looks like when you're really struggling. This is what it looks like as you're coming through the struggling. And so,
Yeah.
that's one of the benefits of like using my own case as a longitudinal case study. But the reality is that we need a lot more research and we
Yeah.
need a lot more light shed on these experiences of disintegration. I can speak about my own, but I I can't I can't give a lot of other examples.
Mm. I can see why you're drawn to ethnography. And, if I have the time, I would love to geek out. I'm a huge fan of qualitative research, cannot deal with anything quantitative. And you probably answered one of the questions I have, which is why isn't this theory gaining more mainstream attention? I personally find it quite obscure, but I guess this is part of the reason why it's not more widely recognized by psychology. It's definitely rendered. I think most psychologists have not heard of it.
Agreed. No, they haven't. And I do think it's the lack of research because uh, research generates more research. And the fact that it's not in I mean, maybe there's a couple. I can think of one article that was in, I think, Frontiers of Psychology several years ago now, but that's it. I mean, there's very little. And then I'm thinking of another one. Well, yeah, so a couple papers maybe in recent years, like that's not
Yeah,
enough to
yeah.
generate. And so that's a big part of the problem is that most of the research has been done in gifted ed, and it's not
Mm,
even very high quality for the most part, the research
right.
in gifted ed. So
Mm,
that's part of the problem.
mm, yeah.
And it
Well,
doesn't mean it's not real. It's
no.
like part of the problem is that this theory also is so phenomenological. It helps shed light on these experiences, the inner experience of and like when you think about what Dabrowski was talking about with giftedness, it's so different than our modern conception that's shaped by these fields in education. I mean, he was talking about giftedness as like a beautiful inner experience that drives people to grow and develop and to help other people. I mean, for him, once you're at the higher levels of development, your focus is, I mean, it goes from being inward to wondering what you can do for other people,
Mm,
for focusing on problems outside of yourself. And so, I think for people like me, it's always a huge balance between my drive to be inward and understanding my own inner experience and trying to figure out how to help other people who are like me
Mm.
reframe their selves and to look beyond pathology. Like it's not easy.
Well, I want to thank you for bringing storytelling and personal narrative into research. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of my passion for qualitative research and hermeneutics. My first published work was a heuristic research. You know what that is? There's an
I
n equal
do.
1 heuristic research using myself as the subject. And I can just imagine the whole science community spitting on it. Maybe I'm being a bit generalizing, but I'm a strong believer in that, and I think it is powerful, but not the entire scholarly community has caught up to that yet. And so thank you for being a beaver in that. But coming back to something more relatable for our audience, if someone feel like they're kind of somehow stuck in the lower level of development, how do they climb up the ladder? What are some of the questions they can ask themselves, perhaps?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think cultivating your own witnessing awareness is a big part of it.
Mm,
There's different ways that you can do it, but it's not easy either. Like, so I think that's part of the struggle is developing your own inner witness, paying more attention to yourself, your patterns, understanding them. You can do it through writing, through personal writing, and it doesn't have to be handwriting in a journal. You know, there are so many ways now to document ourselves. I mean, so many people now like to journal with ChatGPT,
I was gonna
right?
go, I want to go there with you, if that's okay. What's your thoughts in all of that? I mean, giftedness, high IQ, building a second brain. I've clients doing very, again, air quote, crazy things that are exciting but scary all at the same time. What's your take in people? Well, you can take this word however you want, but people using it as a therapist, using it as a personal development tool, or building a system that changes the world. What are your thoughts? And you're a writer. Are you
It's,
worried? Is it taking your job away?
I'm not worried that AI is going to take my job away. Well, and interestingly, you know, the Notebook LM can make podcasts, which I think is equally mind-blowing that you can give it a document and it will create a podcast of people talking about it, which I'm like, well, and so my first thought
I
was
have
like, oh my
listened to
gosh, is
some
this
of that.
gonna,
I get
it's
so
not the same. That's
there's
right.
always
And
a male and a female voice for some reason. And they
that's
always have these
right.
really strive contests. Anyway, I'm not a huge
Right.
fan yet.
And no, me neither. And so, but my first thought was like, oh, is this gonna take the place of podcasting? No, I don't think
Mm,
so because there's no spontaneity, there's no stories built in of people's real lived experiences. So, but yeah, it's what do I think? I think I use ChatGPT all the time. It's like the
mm,
personal assistant that I never knew I needed, but I do. And one of the beautiful things for me with ChatGPT has been able to work with my own personal data in it. And yet, I see how often it's wrong. It is wrong so much. It
mhm.
does not always
Yeah.
accurately even summarize the information that I'm giving to it. Sometimes I feel like I'm wasting so much time arguing with it and telling it to reset, to stop. You're fabricating this, that I wonder why I'm even bothering. But on the other hand, I it is useful. You know, I mean, it is a useful tool if you understand its limitations.
Mm,
And so I do think that it can be really helpful if you are wanting to, if you don't know where to start and you're like, well, I don't know if I can write a journal. I've always failed at that. You can log into ChatGPT every day and say, okay, I feel like I'm stuck and I'm in this pattern. Can you help me work through it? I would like to come back here every day or once a week and talk about what I'm doing. It will give you prompts. It will allow you to standardize your responses
mm.
and and collect them over time and hold them in a place that you can return to, which is valuable.
Mm,
You
mm,
know, you just have to understand that it's imperfect and only as good as what you're giving it to some extent, I would
mm.
say.
That's really practical suggestion. Thank you. And to get even more fine grain, do you recommend ChatGPT or is there a particular bot or tool that you would recommend?
I mean, I have been using ChatGPT, but it seems to me that, you know, other ones would work too. I haven't gone into other ones too much in depth to be able to speak to them well, but I've talked to other people who use like Gemini or
Yeah.
uh, Copilot or whatever
This may
other
sound
options are.
eerie. I personally think they all have different personalities. Some of them annoy me a bit more than others.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm, yeah. Some are very politically correct, and some are too creative for my liking. Some are a little cheeky and humorous anyway. But okay. Yeah, so that is a way of growing people can do on their own. But you also talk a lot about the relational and community. So I think one theme that many people find is being a misfit in mainstream society and finding it really hard to find their people. Any idea what they can do?
That's real. It is hard to, you know, I think that growth happens easiest or best when you have safe reciprocal relationships where you're mirrored well by somebody who's understanding and non-judgmental. Well, unfortunately, that's not always easy to find. You know, I mean, I've just
Mm,
described like the perfect way for it to happen, and not everybody has that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head of emails I've received from people saying that they feel a sense of belonging and listening to positive disintegration that they've never experienced elsewhere, which is amazing and also kind of heartbreaking to me to hear. Um, I personally have not, like, I used to think that I could create the community for people. I've tried it and pulled back from it because I don't have the capacity to do it. But there are I do think that there are spaces online where you can connect with other people. I mean, I know Emma, my co-host, has a group called Adults with Overexcitabilities,
mm.
and it's a space where people can connect. We may, with Cosmic Cheer Squad, have a public group where
Can you,
we,
it's called
you know,
Cosmic Truth Squad.
oh, Cosmic Cheer
What?
Squad.
Cheer Squad. Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Right. And
Mm,
so, yeah, I mean, we may, in Cosmic Cheer Squad, the podcast came from a little private group that B started of like misfit people that she thought that would coexist well. And so we have not opened it up to the public. It's her group. You know, we haven't like turned that into our group with the podcast and have no plans to, but it's hard to find your people.
yeah.
It's not as easy as you'd think. And um, I don't really have answers for how to do that in people's actual lives, unfortunately, because it's so context dependent on where they are and who they are
Yeah.
and how ready they are to be in relationship with other people in a healthy way. I think that's part of
Do
it
you think
too.
they're more likely to find their people in, say, gifted communities like Mensa, or I don't know, intergifted? Or are they better off going on a dating app and going to the local libraries?
Well, that's such a great question. I mean, it's true that we have spaces like Intergifted or Mensa or other societies for high intelligence if that's where you fit. But you may also do just as well, like you said, at the local library, or, you know, if maybe if you have, if you're artistic or creative, finding other artistic, creative people is going to be better for you than Mensa.
Mm,
You know, it depends on your passions, I think, and
mm. And maybe
that's
all,
important.
because we all have different pockets to us. You know, for me, I find, yeah, I no longer wish for any one community or person to meet all pockets of my needs and just
Yes, that's
diversify
right.
it. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's so important. But yeah, it's like, I mean, for me, I'm happy just having a few people in my life,
Mm.
honestly. Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of a natural hermit where I like to write a lot and read, and those are such solitary pursuits. And
Mm.
yet I do need people in my life too, which I feel blessed to have met. And when I think about like Emma and B and Marnie too, now we're doing this other podcast, like all three of these friendships that I've developed with these people are so special and happened in different ways. And like fate is such a part of meeting people and, you know, just luck sometimes too.
Did you say fate?
Hmm.
I love that. Yes. Yeah. Well, you're gonna like this. ChatGPT. The Cosmic Cheer Squad is a podcast co-hosted by Chris Wells, designed to support and uplift people who are navigating personal growth, transformation, and deep inner struggles. The term cheer squad conveys a sense of encouragement, solidarity, and emotional support, particularly for people who feel misunderstood, isolated, or overwhelmed by the intensity of their experiences. And there are more, but hey, they know about
Wow.
you.
It's so nice. Thanks, chat,
It
for
it
that
says
lovely
the podcast
description.
creates a safe and empowering space for listeners.
Oh, well, that's what we're trying to do for sure.
Pretty
Well, we know
accurate.
it is. And I think that that came directly from what I've already described is
Mm,
people telling us that they feel seen and supported and they appreciate positive disintegration. And I thought, well, with Cosmic Cheer Squad, we're having much less formal, I suppose, conversations where it's, I don't know, it feels to me like I don't have to be the expert on Cosmic Cheer Squad. I get to just show up and whatever happens is fine.
yeah. Look, I can't believe we're already an hour into this conversation.
Oh my gosh, me
There are so
neither.
many things I want to touch on. Well, there are two more tiny things. If you have the time, we may touch on. I want to talk about your non-binary journey, and I'm also curious a little about a midlife crisis, which is another passion topic of mine. Um, what do you think? Can we go
Well,
into them for a bit?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so the non-binary identity, I wish I could remember clearly when I discovered the term non-binary, but
Mm,
I don't. But yeah, like I just always felt like a defective woman, I guess, or girl before I was a woman, like in age-wise. Like when I was a kid, I remember being like, okay, I I just didn't feel like I fit, but I didn't have the language for it. Again, that was another part of not of feeling that there was something wrong with me was that it just didn't feel like I fit into girl, but I also didn't feel like I fit into boy either. So it seemed like there was some other option that was missing for me. And so I think it was around 2014 or 2015 when I guess it was 2015 actually. I met this woman who is a professor of women's studies, and she started opening my eyes to some of the literature in her field in gender,
mm,
and I think that must be where I finally discovered that term. And by 2017, I know I was using non-binary as something I realized I was,
mm.
and yet it was still kind of a journey of acceptance because even though I recognized myself in it immediately, I wasn't sure like how my partner was going to feel about it or my son
Course, you were
or like
married
it.
and have a kid then already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it was a lot to wrap my head around, but I mean in my story, like having a child, the time when I felt the most like I fit in as a woman was like when I was pregnant and it was like, oh, here I am having this experience that like maybe I am, a woman. Like
Mm.
it's so weird to me in retrospect to realize like the thinking that went on around it. But yeah, now it's hard to see. Like now, I accept myself too as trans because I don't feel cis. Like if you're cis, then you do fit into this binary of male or female, and that fits for you. That's great. I don't feel that, and so I identify as trans. And now here in America, or I guess elsewhere too in the world, to just see that trans rights are in peril,
Yeah.
and every day there's more news about that, and I'm like, wow. Like, because I just can say that I don't think anybody would choose this
Mm,
difference.
mm,
Like it makes life so much more complicated and challenging to not fit in into the binary of gender that it's tough. But anyway, it was an essential part of my own process of self-discovery and growth, and certainly was a disintegration that I had to go through that was layered and took time to wrap my head around. I'm still wrapping my head around it, and I'm still, um, yeah, I mean, it's still a process with people who know and love me, who know that I identify this way and choose they, them, and still struggle to accept me that way. Maybe they want to. I've had people be like, oh, well, I hate they, them. Like, do you have to use those as your pronouns? And
mm,
I'm like, wow, do you know how that feels to me? Like for you to say that, like it's always interesting for me to like gently point out to people, what if like have you considered examining your bias around this? Like instead of telling me that my pronouns make you uncomfortable, like,
mm,
huh?
mm.
It's tough.
It's painful to see the world going back within time and what's happening right now
Yes.
before things change. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's tough right now. It really is.
Mm, yeah. That does tie into a bigger question of for many neurodivergent people, especially those with overexcitabilities, there are lots of negative silos and environments that don't support them or even aggressive and attacking. How do they survive it if you can't stay away from it? Or should they? Should they intentionally stay away or should they find ways to be a stronger, tougher cookie? What do you suggest with people?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, being stronger. That it's interesting because in Dabrowski's early work, he uses this phrase of emotional hardening, I think it was,
Mm,
which is, of course, that like, can you harden but can you like harden yourself and still be who you need to be in the world? I think that's like an essential question and conflict for me. Like when I was younger, I was really angry a lot because I was obviously reacting to my environment and protecting myself and defending against being hurt. But that wasn't the way to be. And so I don't think the answer is to become like a tough cookie and to harden yourself. And yet it's so hard to live in this harsh world uh, with an open, loving heart. So phew, that that's a tough one. I don't know. I think it's okay to protect yourself, and I think it's okay. I mean, by not exposing yourself to environments that aren't right for you.
mm.
I do that when I
I don't
can't
see why
be
not.
somewhere,
Mm,
I'm not there. When
yeah.
I like I've learned to not betray myself by saying yes to things that I shouldn't do. And
Mm.
that's hard because it means disappointing people. And yet, sometimes it's worth disappointing people.
Or you disappoint your own soul.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Really, I don't disagree with that at all because the world is huge. Why torture yourself? Why stay an
Exactly.
ugly duckling when you know already that you're not a duckling? Don't have
That's
to.
right.
Mm.
That's Emma's. She loves the ugly duckling story.
Yeah.
She has talked about like her early videos on adults with overexcitabilities are she called them her swan diaries, which I loved,
Oh.
where she's talking about herself from this new framework that she had
Mm.
discovered. So it's really beautiful.
Mm. Thank you. Well, if someone feels like they're in the middle of a midlife crisis, wondering if it is a midlife crisis or positive disintegration or something else, they're questioning their identity and purpose and unfulfilled potential, so I just throw a whole lot into it. Um, how does positive disintegration potentially help them make sense of their midlife crisis? And if it is about authenticity, and people find themselves stuck in their roles and identities or a job for a long time that don't fit them. I guess it kind of links into your non-binary journey as well. So how do they begin the process of reintegration?
Well, honor your struggle for one thing. And I
Mm,
think that's what's so beautiful about positive disintegration. Honor your struggle, see it as a growth process and lean into that. Work on your self-acceptance. I think that you can I think that you can do kind of an inventory on the things in your life that are working and aren't working and do your best to say, okay, these are the parts of my life and myself that are more like me that I want to lean into and develop in myself. And you can look at the aspects of your life and yourself that you want to move away from. This is kind of an essential process, I think, of working through positive disintegration is this affirmation of the aspects of yourself that you love the most, that you see as you and authentic, and letting go and rejecting the parts of yourself that aren't authentic, that maybe you adopted from elsewhere. You can you can you can explore your values in depth and align with them more fully and allow yourself to grow through them. Um, I think it's a process of discovering like the deeper truths in your own life that you have to move toward. And I guess it also connects with what I just said that like you can't make everybody happy. You're going to disappoint people by being your authentic self. That is just kind of a natural part of this. But you're going to be happier with yourself that way. And, you have to find a way to be okay with letting people down. I think like part of my midlife discovery has been this acceptance of myself as PDA, which I really dislike pathological demand avoidance. I really like pervasive drive for autonomy. Yes,
I
I've always had a pervasive
love
drive for
that.
autonomy,
I love
and
that.
I am no longer thinking this about something that's wrong with me. Like this is who I am, and yeah, it's been an interesting part of my journey.
Yes,
Like, okay.
it's a public declaration of your
Of acceptance,
authenticity. Yes,
of yes,
yes,
of
I love that.
authenticity. I love it.
I
That's
just came
great.
up with it. I'm very proud of it. Oh my
I love it.
God. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being so I don't know, big picture and at the same time personal with your sharing.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I wanted to tell you too, before I forget, that it was Michael Bihovsky that clued me into your work for the first time in 2017. I was going through such just a difficult time, and he sent me your website and was like, you should subscribe to this newsletter. And he appreciated your newsletter, which I think was interesting. And that's how I discovered you.
2017. I
I
was a
think so.
baby. Gosh, I feel old now. 2017.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been subscribing since then and just paying attention to
Oh,
your work. And I am excited to finally be here having this conversation with you.
thank Thank you. I'm very happy to have this conversation too. Yeah. It's never too late, isn't it, for anyone? If someone feel like,
No,
oh my God, it's too late. It's too late for me to find my potential. I'm 56. I've wasted all my life in not discovering intensity. I don't know what to say, but it's never too late.
it's never too late. No. Yeah, that's right. It's never too late. I mean, I think as long as you're breathing, you have the
Mm,
opportunity to grow and develop as a person.
yeah. Sometimes it's hard to embrace that tension between mourning lost opportunities, lost time, and embracing the excitement and possibility for transformations. We have to do both to move on. Waking up
That's
can be
right.
painful like that, I think. It's exciting, and then you have to mourn the fact that you haven't done it sooner.
Yes, totally.
Hmm. Thank you. Any last, where can people find you? Where should they go? You have too many. Where should they go
Too
first?
many. Oh, well, you can find me at positiveddisintegration.org or dabrowskicenter.org. Those are the two websites. On Substack, you can find me at Cosmic Cheer Squad and PDA Resistance and Resilience now as well. So any of those places.
Thank you. I will put some of the links, which I'm sure will not be exhaustive, in the link to this conversation podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure being here.